So in this quick start session, we're going to talk about what you're going to be learning in the Profiler Training Certification course. We're going to go into a little bit more of the framing of what the course is actually going to cover.
What we're primarily focused on is Jungian typology. Now, a lot of any of the sort of the 4-point systems that we use commonly in personality psychology, anything that has like a metric of 4 is generally based on Jungian typology. Myers-Briggs is an example, socionics is an example, and there's a lot of different variations. The Genius system that we utilize is an example. It's all based on Jungian typology. But we're going to go way further down the rabbit's hole than the vast majority of, say, Myers-Briggs information sources that are out there. So if you're already familiar with personality types, that's not a bad thing, all right? That's cool. That gives you a leg up, and that's awesome. The only thing is that because of the inaccessibility of some of the deeper content in Myers-Briggs, what has happened along the way is that in order to make it simple to use and easy to understand, some of the accuracy has been lost. And it's been, in some ways, a little bastardized. We've actually ended up accepting into sort of our social unconsciousness some of these concepts. And in the translation of all of that, some of the information has become a little bit sort of corrupted from its original intention. So don't be surprised if you're familiar with Jungian typology or Myers-Briggs or any of the other personality psychology systems out there. If you have to kind of unlearn some of it and then relearn it, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and even if you've gone down the rabbit's hole a little bit in the Myers-Briggs system where you've gotten into the cognitive functions, we look at these in a little bit different way than maybe you have looked at them. And so some of these may be familiar, but the way we're going to present it and the way we're going to look at it and hold it out here and look at it in a three-dimensional fashion is going to be much more, I would say, robust than maybe you're used to seeing. So it's great that you're bringing some of these skill sets to the table if you've studied some of this, but just understand, hold back on judgment as you go through, because we're going to go into a more rounded view of some of these. So just be cautious that you don't have the confirmation bias or the I know fallacy of, well, I've already covered this, I don't need to pay attention, because we're going to break these down in a way that we believe is the most useful over time. It's a little bit more technical in nature than the basic Myers-Briggs that most people use. And the reason why it's been distilled down to its basic essence is for usability in business, in relationship coaching, things of this nature. People want it to be accessible and able to be used, but when you do that, you lose some of the deeper meaning, some of the deeper uses for it. So we're really going to go into those.
Or you can. One of the things that personality hackers really tried to work on is taking the robust component and the accessibility component and marrying them together in the Genius system. However, we're not going to just refer to the Genius systems like, say, nicknames, if you're familiar with what those are. We're actually going to be talking about all of the technical terms in the Myers-Briggs and Jungian typology system. So it's not going to be just simple and accessible. You're going to do a deep dive. So we're going to get into the technical components as well. And really what Joel's talking about is coming from what's called a beginner's mind. So even if you're not a complete beginner, please hold space and feel free to come at it from a beginner's mind, because you might pick up some stuff or some nuanced sort of refinements that really help things click and really make a sense on a bigger level. We're going to be using a process in profiling called triangulation. Okay, triangulation means that you're looking for the access point between 3 primary factors. The first factor is called dichotomies, all right? The dichotomies are what most people are the most familiar with when it comes to Myers-Briggs. This is introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuiting, thinking, feeling, and judging, perceiving. So I'm an ENTP in the Myers-Briggs system. Well, ENTP, those are my dichotomies. And these are the behavioral elements. This is what people can see, what's observable about me, and that's what makes it understandable, easy, and accessible. But these are technically called the dichotomies. And the triangulation process is to take that piece. And then the second piece, which are the 8 cognitive functions. Now, if you've never done a deep dive into Myers-Briggs or Jungian typology and you're not familiar with the cognitive functions, you will be intimately familiar with them by the time we're done with this program.
We use them a lot.
We use them all the time. And what's so powerful about the functions is that this is actually the wiring in our minds. If the dichotomies are how we present and our behavior and what we bring out to the world, the cognitive functions are the source of that behavior. The behavior emerges from the wiring inside of our minds. And so this is really how people experience reality. And this is really where all of our behaviors, how we manifest to the world, this is really where it all gets rooted from.
And adding this element into the triangulation process, oftentimes when you're looking just at behavior, you can see someone behaving a certain way. Maybe they're behaving extroverted, they're outgoing, or they're bombastic, but truly they're an introvert. They have an introverted process that they lead with, and we'll explain what that is in the actual course. But this is how someone can be an introvert but look like they're an extrovert to the outer world. And we're going to get into how you can tell the difference between those because of bringing in the cognitive function set.
Absolutely. So the triangulation, again, is the dichotomies, which is your behavior, the cognitive functions, which is your wiring, and then we're also going to bring a component of what that looks like holistically. So we'll refer to the 16 personality types. We're also going to talk about a model called the Kiersian 4 temperaments, which is yet another way to look at it. And then something that Personality Hacker has developed, which is a concept called the polarities. The polarities are a way of looking at the cognitive functions that make them a little bit more fleshed out. So we'll take all of those, the 16 types, the 4 temperaments, and the polarities, and we'll put that in as the third piece of triangulation. Now, these are the distinctions between the types. They're models for helping us understand a variety of unconscious desires and focuses. And when you bring in the behavior, the wiring, and the resulting desires and motivations inside, and then you put those 3 things together, at the center point of that Venn diagram. Exactly. The axis point of all of that will be the person's personality type. So that's really what we're going to be focused on, is the triangulation process. So when we learn one of these components, it's not just to learn it all by itself. It's to learn it and then learn the next piece and see how they marry together.
So what we'll be doing with all of these is it's almost like we're going to take a hammer, we're going to shatter them into their individual parts. We're going to look at each one of those parts separately, and then we're going to reassemble it around individual personality types. So you'll not only see how the parts work in isolation of each other, but then we're going to put those back together and the interrelational part of each of those. So each thing affects something else in a different manner if it's a different element. That was a little convoluted, but basically we're going to break everything apart. We're going to look at it individually, then we're going to reassemble it, kind of like Humpty Dumpty falling back off the wall. He's going to break apart. We're going to look at all the parts, put it back together, and then we'll see a holistic picture of how those parts interplay with each other.
Now, it's important to remember that personality psychology is a soft science. All right. And what that means basically is that there's not going to be any hard numbers here. There's not going to be any ones and zeros. It is not digital. It's analog. All right. So that means that you are going to have to really show up as the profiler. You're going to have to get as intimate with the content as you can. You're going to have to use absolutely every excuse to practice that you possibly can. You're going to have to become the instrument that figures out how to bring this content into something practical. And so it can be more art than science. Really having your feelers out, really getting like very in tune with what people are doing and why they're doing it. You're going to be the most important instrument in the entire course. So remembering that it's more art than science is going to be really important for you to realize that it's not just a matter of going, okay, well, this is what an introvert looks like and this is what an extrovert looks like, but more getting that fine grain in there, more kind of going, okay, well, I can see that component of introversion, but over here, this is feeling extroverted. And I remember that we were talking about cognitive functions in the driver and the co-pilot, and okay, so I can see how that co-pilot shows up. So if that doesn't make any sense to you right now, it will later on. And you're going to have to really bring your best self, your best intuitive self forward. Even if you're not an intuitive, this will be a part of, because all of us have an intuitive part of us, this will be something that brings that intuitive part out.
So we're going to move on to the next quick start session. But just remember, we're looking to try to determine the difference between behavior and actual mental wiring, and the combination or the interplay between those two in a person. And so as we move on, just kind of keep that in mind. That's what we're looking to do, is begin to look at not only behavior, which is where we tend to start at profiling, but also look at the reasons behind that behavior.